Okay, so this is what I'm going to be using to do my bucket seat sliders. For those of you who've got a fixed bucket seat for the driver's side in the UK, it can be a real pain in the arse trying to pass the MOT. I've contacted the governing body, BOSSA or whatever they're called, and they tell me that it's fine to a fixed bucket seat. It should be classed as a, I forget what they call it, some kind of modification, but when it comes to MOT and I keep getting failed. So what I've decided to do, rather than spend hundreds of pounds on some sliders, I bought these ones from eBay, which were about £35. So they're designed for a specific width bolt pattern on your car because of this bit here which goes between them, so it'd be quite narrow. So what I'm going to be doing is cutting this, and depending on whether that's hollow or solid, I'll extend it with either putting some metal bar through it or some kind of pipe over it to extend that. So the side mounts I've got I've had a quick look and they roughly should fit. I might have to get a file and extend these holes one way or another, but my side mounts are going to fit on there, which will then be attached to this 3mm steel, and I'll have to measure that up and drill holes either side then, which will then attach to the mounts you've got in the floor of the car. That's the plan anyway. So in terms of tools, this is what I used. It's probably going to vary a lot depending on how much faffing you have to do to get things to fit, but anyway, so Allen keys, although I only needed one. Mine was size 6. Not really tools, but a load of different sockets. A load of washers. Protective gear. So got ear defenders. Eye protection. And some gloves. I haven't got them out at the moment, but there was an angle grinder and your drill and some metal drill bits. Probably want some grease as well to grease the drills while you're drilling. Hammer. What job doesn't need a hammer? File. Although I didn't use that one as much. This one was essential. Circular one. Got a variety of sockets. So the seat bolts and nuts are 16mm, and then depending on what size nuts you're putting on your Allen key bolts. So I got a 13mm socket there. Not really tools, but a load of different size 8mm Allen key bolts. I think I mentioned that in the video. Sharpie, a couple of different pliers, these sort of angular needle nose pliers, screwdriver, trusty BMW screwdriver, some regular pliers. So I got a 16mm ratchet spanner, which is quite useful because some of the bolts, when you're bolting the seat back in or undoing it, it's a bit difficult to get to. I got my wrench, extension, whatever. There's that Allen key. 30mm spanner, knife, got some tin snips. Okay, so I've disconnected the battery already. You should always do that if you're touching the electrical system. Make sure you centralize both the sliders so they're in exactly the same position as each other. So I'm going to be using, I've got a spare set of the side mount Allen key bolts, so I'm going to be using these to attach the side mount to the slider. Because the holes are fairly big in the bottom of the side mounts compared to these. Not sure how big these are, maybe 8mm. So what I'm going to do is cut out some pieces of probably like 3mm steel to make sort of something similar to this, like a big washer. You're going to need 8 per seat. Well, I only do my driver's seat, so you're going to need 8 of these side mount bolts, and you're going to need the nuts to go with them. I think this is an 8mm one. You also need a good selection of washers as well. Probably these bolts may be too long, so just to lift it away from anything it might rub against at the bottom. Picked the Allen key bolts, or Allen key driven bolts, are perfect because where I'm going to be bolting the slider into the piece of metal that I'm going to be then attaching to the floor of the car, you can't get to the, if this was a normal bolt, you wouldn't be able to get a spanner on it to turn. If you get the Allen key ones, you can poke an Allen key through the gap above. This is the right hand side mount. So because of this bit here, you can't actually pull the lever once it's fitted. So I'm going to have to cut this bit out. So this is becoming more and more of a pain in the ass as I go along. I've just marked the rough places of where it will connect to the car. And unfortunately this slider is going to be in the way, because it is actually, the slider is actually the same length. I line that one with the first cross. That's the slider bit underneath there. And then the other end is where the other mark is. So I think I'm going to have to cut maybe about 1 inch, 3 centimeters maybe, off there. So once this is bolted on, it should bolt on about there. Well, no, the end of the slider should be about there and there, so it'll give me room to get the nuts or bolts, whatever the side you're doing, in here. So yeah, pain in the ass. I bought 8 20mm length 8mm radius, high tensile Allen key bolts, the ones usually used for side mounts, for connecting the seat to the side mounts. And I've got some 8mm lock-in nylon nuts as well. So 8 of each of those, and just a load of flat washers, and also some, so you probably want about, I don't know, as long as you've got 20 odd of those for taking up any slack. And I've also got some of the, I'm not sure what they're called, they're the washers that have got a split in them. So as you tighten, they ping back together. So yeah, get a load of them as well. So I've been messing around with trying different size bolts and everything. So the 20mm ones were the shortest ones I could get of the high tensile bolts, so I've gone with them. I've put, I don't know where I put it now. So I've assembled the left hand side. So starting from the top, I've got the little pieces of steel that I cut out, which I'm using as a giant washer. Then I needed one of the bigger flat washers, one of the washers that have got the split in them, and then the 20mm Allen bolt. So with those washers, and whether you can see in there, you can just see the nylon lock-in nut. So with all those washers, it gives you clearance so that when you put the bolt in the underside of the slider, those two, the top of the bolt of this bolt doesn't hit the bottom of this bolt. So that seems to work. So I've done the same with the back of this left hand side, piece of metal using as a washer, a couple of washers, 20mm high tensile bolt, and then once I put the bolts in to the bottom, you're able to, so if I pull that in, as I slide the bolts miss each other. So that's the left hand one done. So make sure, obviously, when you're using the same holes on your left and right side mount. So in my case, I'm using the 2 inside holes. So I've got 5 at the front and back. So I'm using the furthest one forward and then the furthest one back, because the sliders, you just sort of do a bit of trial and error, see which, because my slider had a couple of holes on the top side to connect to, so you just see which ones allow you to line up and use the 2, actually be able to put both bolts in. So this is the top of the slider. So I've got 2 holes, I've got 3 there. So make sure you use the same holes on the left and right, so everything lines up properly. Good idea to get a pen and mark which holes you're using. Okay, the next bit is to cut off the remaining thread with your angle grinder. It works out quite well because where these bolt into the car, you've got about 3 centimeters between the edges of this nut and that bolt. So if you look on the floor of your car where this bolts to the ground, it's raised, and by the time you get 3 centimeters away, the raised bit has dropped back down, so there should be enough room then, which allows for this thickness of this nut to not be stuck against the ground, or you're having to raise up this side. So I've lined everything up in relation to the car just to make it a bit more easy for my simple brain. So connecting the seat to the side mounts, I've got the standard, I don't know what they are, maybe 25mm, 25mm length, 8mm Allen bolts. But because I use the rear left one to attach the seat belt, whatever it's called, so I've bought a few longer ones, because I remember when I first fit the I wasn't able to put any washers or anything on that one because the bolt wasn't long enough. So I've got like I think a 40mm bolt. I'm going to make sure both of my sliders are set in the same position. Put the seat on and see how it lines up in the car. So I'll probably have to do some adjustments to this bottom plate. I expect it's not going to be that easy. So I'm going to aim for the front of the seat to be fairly high, and then the back to be on the lowest one possible, because I'm quite tall. Try and get as much headroom as I can. So I think I'm going to try and at least cut out this bit of carpet here. So I pulled the ashtray out, and the little cubby, whatever it's called. Put a couple of screws in here. So I've got a bit of copper pipe, that's roughly the right length to go between because I had to cut the handle which moves the sliders, because obviously they were too narrow, the whole item. So I think it's going to be a bit of a squeeze, trying to get it in. But there's a little bit of play. Just fill it out a bit with some good old duct tape. Okay, so I've now got a problem, another one, because the bolt that goes into the car is now off centre. As you try and slide the seat backwards, the bolt is catching against this here. So what I've done, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to get the angle grinder and cut a bit out of there. so that as you slide, this bit isn't catching on the bolt that goes into the car. In an ideal world, that bolt would have been central, so it wouldn't have caught on this outer bit of the slider. It would have just gone straight down the middle. But yeah, things are never simple with this car. Okay, we can see where I've cut a bit out, so that should give me an extra 100mm or so of travel. So I've done that on both sides. Not very tidy, but I just want to get this finished, to be honest. Just taken the passenger bucket seat out and just pulled the carpet out. And you really have to cut it to get it out around this seat belt. So I want to do a couple of cuts there, and it all just slides out then. Just take this trim off again. So I'm just going to reassemble this little bit around the handbrake. Spent quite a long time with my with like a small round file. I've had to elongate a lot of these holes. So these are the holes that bolt the seat to the car. So that one was elongated a little bit. The other front one a little bit, and the two rear. See, I've had to quite oval now, and this one. So you can measure as well as you know. You can measure what you think is pretty accurate, but once you get it in, they're going to be out. So yeah, you definitely need a bit of elbow grease on one of these files. It's a bit of trial and error really until it fits. But this should be ready to go in now, hopefully. The moment we've all been waiting for, the seat sliders in action. Actually, they're pretty crap to be honest, but if they pass an MOT, then that's all I care about. It's not like I ever move them, just leave it in one position. Here we go. All the way forward, to all the way back. It's pretty damn amazing.